If you walk down the crowded streets of Salem, Massachusetts in the fall, you'll come face to face, literally, with witches, goblins, ghosts, and a whole lot of tourists. The history of the Salem Witch Trials, film sites of beloved movies like Hocus Pocus, and a love of Halloween tradition brought more than 1 million visitors to the city last year in the month of October alone, breaking a record. As Salem's popularity as a tourist destination grows, the city and its residents have had to adapt in more ways than one. A relatively small coastal community of 45,000, about 16 miles north of Boston, Salem is among Massachusetts' 26 gateway cities, former industrial and manufacturing cities with shared characteristics and economic struggles that anchor regional economies around the state. But to the delight of local businesses, and sometimes the dismay of downtown residents, Salem has something other gateway cities don't: a thriving seasonal tourism economy. I'm Gateway Cities reporter Hallie Claflin, and this is the Codcast, CommonWealth Beacon's podcast about policy and civic life here in Massachusetts. Today, I'm joined by Salem Mayor Dominick Pangallo. Dominick, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Mayor, you grew up in Salem, and it's where you're now raising your own family. Talk about the tourism boom. The number of visitors has increased since the pandemic, but looking back 20, 30, even 40 years ago, what did Salem look like in October? I'm sure the city had visitors, but does it compare to what it is today?
No, not by any means. So Salem, when I was a kid, had some tourism. We had a few museums in town, the Witch House, the Witch Museum. There was a few places like that. There's a lot more now. It definitely started taking off into the late 90s and the early 2000s. But the big spike that we saw really came, as you said, after COVID kind of subsided and the pandemic concluded. We were already on a trajectory of increasing visitation up to that point, slowed down in 2020. And then since then, we've had, for the last few years, about 1 million visitors every October. We have about 3.5 to 4 million tourists come to Salem every year. But to have 1 million of them coming in 1 month is definitely, as you said, a significant endeavor for us to be able to manage that.
Salem is a relatively small city of 45,000 residents, leading many to question, how in the world does it have the infrastructure to support the hundreds of thousands of tourists that visit every year and every October? How does the city prepare for and manage the flood of tourists during the fall, and how much time and money goes into that prep?
So our October preparation happens all year long. We start really November 1st with after-action reviews of what happened in October and how we can build on and improve what happened in the previous year. For the city, first and foremost, it's a public safety operation. For us to be able to welcome 1 million people in the course of a month safely and effectively to not just a city that's 8 square miles, but really a downtown and a waterfront area that's a smaller portion of that. Historic streets, built with horse and buggy in mind, not with cars and the number of people that we have here. We're going to be turning 400 years old next year in 2026, so we are a historic coastal city, but we don't have the capacity to manage that many people without careful planning, and so that happens all year long, both internally and externally. We have a lot of community partners that we work with. One of the really unique aspects of Haunted Happenings, which is what we call our October activities, is that it's not a single ticketed event. There isn't a gate you go through and you're in the event. It's hundreds of privately organized activities at attractions, museums, restaurants. There are walking tours. There are larger scale events like the Grand Parade at the start of the month. There's smaller scale events all happening, and so it takes a lot of coordination with all those partners as well to make sure we're able to do it safely. From our perspective, the biggest aspect from the municipality's perspective is our public safety operations and our public works operations. So we spent a considerable amount of time thinking about how we are going to deploy portable restrooms, extra trash receptacles. The road closure operations are significant. In the past, they had kind of happened sporadically. In the last couple of years, we've started scheduling them intentionally and letting people know, plan on Essex Street closing at this time, plan on Washington Street closing at this time at this location. That lets people, I think, plan ahead. Traffic and parking is definitely, I think, the largest pain point that we have to plan for. But from a public safety perspective, that's our largest expenses. Managing that over time, managing the infrastructure, the barricades and everything else that comes in to make sure we can close roads and keep people safe.
Gotcha. And I imagine, is this particularly costly for the city? I don't know if there's a certain number of how much this costs every year.
Yeah, I mean, there is an expense to it. So last year, the city, we in our after action review, we do look at the finances every year and try to identify ways we can generate additional revenues to offset costs and provide the services that we need. So we know last year we spent about $640,000 in direct expenses related to October. Most of that is public safety and public works, and most of that is overtime costs. We do substantially increase the police presence in Salem throughout the month, and we need to ensure that not only are we providing that level of safety to the downtown area where all the tourism is, but also to all the neighborhoods. So you still need to be able to call 911 and get police and fire response safely and quickly. So that requires us to really increase the capacity of our department. We do that by relying on our surrounding communities and the state police, the MBTA police, Salem State University's campus police, all of our partners, NEMLEC, which is the Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, to provide an extra level of protection to the community across the city.
Can you talk about the impact of the fall tourism on Salem's local economy, how it has impacted jobs, how it benefits or overwhelms local businesses, and how it has maybe transformed Salem as a gateway city?
So the tourism economy in Salem is significant. It's not our largest employer. It's responsible for about 1,200 jobs, which is about 4% of our local labor force. Our largest employers are healthcare and higher education. Salem State University, Salem Hospital is the largest hospital north of Boston in the MGB network, located here. But when you come downtown, we enjoy a close to 98% storefront occupancy rate in our downtown and along the waterfront, primarily because of the visitor economy. It keeps in business the attractions and the stores and the restaurants that we as residents get to enjoy year round, and provides those kinds of job opportunities. We do derive revenues as a city from these kinds of activities. So, of course, there's property taxes that all those commercial properties pay. If they weren't a tourism-related business, they might be a different type of business, but they would be generating the property taxes. So it's kind of hard to disentangle that. But we also have meals excise and lodging excise, parking revenues. So that all brings in revenue to the city. Last year, we brought in the month of October, about $700,000 in direct revenues, not including our meal and lodging excise, which we don't know on a monthly basis. DOR gives that information to us on a quarterly basis. But we do know that the quarter that included October last year was about $1.5 million in meals and lodging, which, to put in context, we have a over $200 million city budget. So it's helpful, but it's not the largest source of revenue supporting city services by any means. But it helps support the services that we especially need to be able to provide in October. For the business's perspective, it's highly lucrative. I think the most recent data is it's about $140 million in direct spending, and then another $140 million in indirect and ancillary spending that flows into the economy for our local businesses, plus the 1,200 or so jobs. So, I think it's very important for our local economy. We're certainly fortunate to have it. It comes with impacts, and not every business in our downtown is connected to the tourism industry. So when October comes around, some of those places have a hard time with the regulars being able to get in and get a haircut or pick up something at the store. So it can be challenging depending on the field of that business.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no doubt that the October tourism boom is incredibly beneficial to small businesses in Salem. But it sounds like in terms of, how lucrative it is for the city itself, it's not the main economic driver.
It's not. I mean, it gives us the benefit of those kind of extra excise taxes. It gives us some ability to generate additional parking revenues. We don't have a lot of parking in Salem, which is why we tell people to take the train or the ferry if they're coming to visit. But the fact that we are able to have that many of our storefronts fully occupied, generating property taxes, generating the economic vitality that happens here, the indirect spending and ancillary spending, when that money is cycled through our local economy. The business that may have a downturn in October because our regulars can't get there, when those regulars come back to shop there or to get those services at that place, they're using money that came in through the tourism economy. So it does indirectly support more of our broader economy here. But I think one of the other powerful ways that we benefit from the visitor economy in Salem is it gives us a chance to tell our story to the world. Salem has some really important stories to tell. The Halloween tourism is big. People love the spooks and the frights and all that comes with that. And it's certainly a fun time for families and kids. My kids love trick-or-treating. It's a big part of, their experience growing up. My own experience growing up is for many families. But we love when people come to Salem and also discover more about our history, our role in the American Revolution, how the great age of sail and maritime trade helped build the American economy. Salem was the economic capital of the young nation because of the maritime trade. Our contributions to literature and to architecture and to so many various chapters of American history. When you come to Salem to discover a fun time for Halloween, hopefully you also leave learning a little bit more about the history that helped shape this nation.
Yeah, you touched on it, but in the last 2 years or so, the city has really started encouraging visitors to take public transit and take the commuter rail train into Salem to sort of alleviate traffic and parking concerns. How has that worked, and are you seeing any results come from that during the October season?
So it's been successful in terms of both the train and the ferry service that we've been able to provide for folks. We work closely with Keolis and the MBTA to increase train service on October weekends and on Halloween so that we are able to move people from the Boston area and north of the city into Salem. Our train station is right in downtown Salem, so you get off and you're right here in the middle of everything. It's a half-hour train ride from Boston, so it really is the easiest way to get into Salem and not have to fight for parking and sit in traffic on 128, which is just, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to get more time in your car than you are going to have walking around the city. The ferry has been especially popular. It leaves from Long Wharf in Boston, comes to Salem Wharf on Blaney Street, which is right around the corner from the House of the Seven Gables, Derby Street, and the National Park site there, the Salem Maritime National Park historic site. We have a 150 passenger ferry that we typically run throughout the season for commuters and visitors. In October, on weekends, we do switch that out with a 600 passenger ferry just because the visitation increases substantially. And for the later weekends in October and on Halloween, we have a ferry from Hingham to Salem that will also be running to provide options for people south of Boston to get here by water as well.
Wow. In the last few years, frankly, lots of residents seem to be fed up with the tourism. There have been reports of downtown residents who don't leave their homes on a weekend. They go somewhere else during the entire month of October. They struggle with the intense traffic. Getting to the grocery store in October might take 2 or 3 times as long as it usually does. And the tourism season is getting longer. People are coming in September now, not just October. At the same time, nobody can really stop this. Nobody is going to magically prohibit tourists from coming. As mayor, how do you handle that tension, and how do you work to address those frustrations from local residents?
I mean, I feel the frustrations too. I have one of my kids is at the Collins Middle School, and the other one's at Salem High School, and being able to drive from where I live in North Salem to get them to school, to get to work, it's a frustration that I think a lot of people in our community feel. One of the reasons we have pushed so heavily on the public transportation messaging is to try to discourage the vehicle traffic that adds to the congestion on our roadways. And I think it has helped. We've seen the visitation kind of leveling off at about 1 million people in October since the end of the pandemic. It hasn't increased as much as it increased between 2019 and 2022. That was a big spike, but now it's kind of leveled off. And we are, as you say, seeing people arrive earlier. And since we're seeing kind of this steady state of about 1 million people in October, but the patterns of travel are changing, where their visitation is coming during weekdays or coming in September. We did see an increase in September, or spreading even into late November. That's helping to spread the visitation out, and so that it's less intensive in those peak October weekends. And we want people to to enjoy our city throughout the year. Everything that you love about Salem in October is here in November. It's here in March. It's here in July. Our summer months are great. We do have visitation throughout the year, and we have festivals and events and all the same activities. It's just easier to find parking and get into that restaurant you want to get into those other times of the year. I think more people are discovering that. So it is a busy time. It can be frustrating for residents to contend with that, but the more we can encourage people to spread their visits out throughout the year and to use public transportation, it alleviates some of that. Because as you said, we can't stop people from coming, nor do we want to. It is important for our economy. We just want to manage the impacts when they visit and help them make good decisions to be able to visit in a way that is less impactful and more enjoyable for them, frankly, as a tourist.
Yeah, I imagine, as lucrative as the tourism is for local businesses, I would imagine that some of them maybe aren't used to the uptick of just how many visitors come in October, maybe feel a little overwhelmed with trying to get people in and serve people at restaurants. There's lines out the door. Do some local businesses sort of struggle with capacity in that sense? And how have they navigated that in recent years?
I think they have, especially since the COVID recovery of the economy is, we saw that uptick to the million number post-COVID. The city, we do work closely with our business partners. So that's the Chamber of Commerce, organizations like Salem Main Street's Creative Collective and Destination Salem to try to help support our businesses to ensure they have capacity, whether it's staff, inventory, access to infrastructure. It can be a lot. I think people, sometimes, especially if they're newer businesses in Salem, hopefully they have their eyes wide open what they're walking into for October, because it can be very, very intensive on the demands and the stress. We do post-October surveys of residents and businesses to try to identify where places were that they could use additional support and the city could focus its efforts, or our partners could focus their efforts. We're also trying to push people to explore more of the physical geography of the city. Our downtown is great. It's walkable. It's got a lot of amazing things to see and to do, places to go. When you get off the train, you're right in the middle of it. So the pattern tends to be that somebody gets off the train, walks down Washington Street, walks down the pedestrian mall on Essex Street out towards the Common, and then makes their way back towards the train. But we really want people to continue exploring all the way down to the waterfront. It's only a block away from there. The Derby Street area has amazing historic sites, more restaurants and shops. And to discover the historic districts around the city. As people come here, we hope they learn more about all the different parts of our community and what they have to offer, because that both spreads out the crowds and helps kind of de-densify the crowds and makes it a little safer, but also ensures that those businesses are getting the support and the benefit of the tourism economy as well.
So I'm curious, I have a pretty good picture in my mind of what Salem looks like in October, but tell me what it's like in November and December, months after visitors are gone. What is it like in May or February? Do some businesses close up shop? Can they survive during the off season?
Most of our businesses stay open. There may be one or two that are very specifically Halloween focused that make the decision to close up in a couple of months, but I would say 99% of the businesses, restaurants, the attractions, the museums are open year round. The seasonal walking tours tend to ebb and flow. There's some the walking tour companies are more established here and grounded in the community. They stay open more throughout the year. Others tend to be very seasonal. But in terms of the brick and mortar businesses, they're open. We have festivals throughout the year, the Salem Arts Festival, Jazz and Soul Festival in the summer, Salem So Sweet in February. There's some pretty remarkable things happening throughout the year in Salem. So if people want to come back, or if they want to schedule a different time to visit than October because they don't like the idea of crowds, and I guarantee you there's people wearing costumes all year round, so you don't have to worry about that too.
Salem sort of stands out as a gateway city. Most other gateway cities, don't have this large of a seasonal tourism economy, might not even have that sort of economy at all. It really sort of begs the question, especially now, of what is a gateway city? As cities like Salem reinvent themselves, what does that gateway city label sort of mean for Salem?
I think Salem, despite we're here talking about tourism and Halloween and October and all that, despite all that, we're still a gateway city in the spirit that we are a place that welcomes new Americans that are looking to add their chapters to America's story. We've been a city created by immigrants from the great age of sail back to our founding, and all the way through the present day as we welcome immigrants into our community who are looking for a better life for themselves. So in that respect, we are a gateway community. We're also a gateway city in that we are former industrial legacies that we're still building off of here. The Blubber Hollow neighborhood is called Blubber Hollow because they used to rent blubber there from whaling and fishing, and the maritime industries that were that prospered along our shorelines transitioned into the energy industry. So we had a coal and oil-fired power plant on our waterfront because of the proximity to the harbor and the deep water berths that were available there that were connected to the maritime trade of the great age of sail. So that legacy of kind of industrial activity still characterizes our city in some respects. Many of those places are being turned into housing now, or they're creating new commercial opportunities. But it still exists in our community, and it's part of our history.
Yeah. I imagine as, more and more tourists come and as the economy grows, is it something that you think the city can continue to manage? Or what would you perhaps see as any sort of state support that might be needed for this?
I think if we're going to talk about state support, I would say in the first instance that the Municipal Empowerment Act that the governor had proposed and is still before the legislature does include the option for cities and towns to increase the local excise on meals and lodging. Salem assesses the maximum level for both of those excises, and we would welcome the opportunity to adjust that upward to help kind of export more of our cost burdens, particularly as things like portable restrooms and police overtime get more and more expensive every year, off of our property taxpayers and residents and onto the tourists who are benefiting from those services and those costs. So that would be something that I think would be a tremendous support for the city. Not every city has that same need, but that's the great part of a local option, is that you can tailor what the level of excise is or whether you adopt it at all to what your local needs are. In Salem, we have several new hotels being built. We have a thriving and vibrant restaurant sector, and we want the opportunity to kind of take the costs that we're incurring because of the tourism economy and pass those costs onto the tourists to fund instead of residential property taxpayers.
Yeah. Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll was the former mayor of Salem, the first mayor of Salem to reach that level of state office. Has that provided any sort of political visibility for the city of Salem at the state level?
I think that one of the benefits of having a lieutenant governor who served as a mayor at all is that she understands fully the challenges, the pressures, the opportunities that exist in municipalities across Massachusetts. So not just Salem, but every city and town, I think, is fortunate to have a champion and an ally in the administration generally, and specifically with the lieutenant governor having that experience here in Salem. Personally, I had the great privilege of serving as her chief of staff when she was the mayor here. I was in that position for 10 years before the special election that placed me here in the corner office. And, I also personally greatly appreciate having the opportunity to engage with the lieutenant governor directly to advocate for things that I think she's very familiar with being local challenges in Salem, whether it's tourism, offshore wind, challenges related to Chapter 70 in our public schools. She gets it. And I think she especially gets it when it comes to matters important to Salem.
I'm curious, the October tourism boom, does that ever have any effect on other surrounding towns and cities outside of Salem, perhaps Peabody?
I would say that it does. I think if you ask many of those towns, there would be a lot of hand-wringing about the traffic that it can bring. But we also know that we don't have enough hotel rooms to accommodate the tens of thousands of people that will come in on a weekend in October. Many of these people are, in fact, probably the majority of them are staying in hotels and short-term rentals throughout the region. I am downtown on weekends in Salem, and I love to ask tourists, where are you from? How long are you here for, and where are you staying? And the vast majority of the people I speak with are actually not staying in Salem. They're staying throughout the North Shore, some into the greater Boston area, and they're coming in by ferry or train for the day for their visit.
Wow. I imagine that, certainly has economic benefits for those surrounding cities and towns as well.
I believe it does. I hope that all of our neighbors are being thoughtful about how they can also benefit from the tourism that's coming. You know, if they're struggling with the travails of the traffic impacts through their city, hopefully they're also able to identify ways to potentially benefit from the visitation too.
The community of Salem has become a very progressive and inclusive place, what some people might consider to be contrary to Salem's long history with the Salem Witch Trials. What would you say about that, or what do you think residents or visitors would have to say about that?
Our values as a community are directly informed by our history. It makes us, I think, uniquely positioned to understand full well what can happen when you are not an inclusive place, when you scapegoat the other, when neighbor turns on neighbor instead of turning towards neighbor and trying to lift them up. We're a welcoming community. We're proud to have the 100% rating from the Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index, to have we're achieving welcoming city status. We are proud to have non-discrimination ordinances and laws and protections in place that really make sure that it's clear that we're a place that wants to welcome everybody, because that's part of our history. That's part of our legacy. And the contributions to this nation extend beyond the founding of this nation. They extend to 1692 and what that teaches us about being inclusive, about due process and jurisprudence and the rule of law, the rules of evidence, and the consequences that can befall a community when those are cast aside.
Yeah. I understand that during the COVID-19 pandemic, the city really tried to tell visitors not to come, in a time of a health crisis like that. And visitors still came. Do you have any fears of any sort of situation arising like that in the future? Or is there anything that the city would maybe do differently if something like that happened again?
I think there were a lot of lessons learned from the pandemic. We learned lessons about public health, about public education, and our buildings and the built environment. I think we also learned about the social safety nets, food support, transportation, support for people that were unhoused, just lots of challenges that came about. Tourism was certainly one that we also learned something about. So Salem did pivot in October of 2020 to change our communications with our destination marketing organization to encourage people to postpone their visit to a future year when things were a little bit more certain and safe. And as you said, we still had people visit. We went from probably 700,000 or 800,000 people the year prior down to about 500,000 visitors in that October. So fewer people, still a lot of people, and many things were not open. So they came here without a whole lot to do. They couldn't go indoors. Many of the places that they might have typically gone to were closed. But we also pivoted in many ways for our tourism economy. We established an economic recovery task force that's still meeting today as our economic coordinating task force. We created a program for outdoor dining that still exists today and is incredibly popular. It adds to the vibrancy of our streets and our public spaces. I think we found ways to pivot from that, support our small businesses, support the essential workers who make those businesses possible, and also ensure that we were maintaining public safety and public health. It wasn't an easy time. It was a particularly stressful time in many respects. We lost many community members, and I think that we've learned a lot from it. But navigating that as a tourism destination was certainly a pretty unique experience and challenge.
Yeah. Last and most important question for you, Mayor. What will you be dressing up as for Halloween this year? Or do you have any trick-or-treating plans?
So my kids are a little older now. We don't trick-or-treat as much. We do like to trick out the house and try to spook other kids in the neighborhood as they come by. Halloween for me is a working holiday, so I will not be dressed up for Halloween. But I have been following a tradition of dressing up as a famous movie mayor or TV mayor for the grand parade at the start of the month. So my first October, for the first parade, I was the mayor of Halloween Town from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Classic.
Yeah, last year I was Mayor Larry Vaughn, who is the mayor from Jaws. It's kind of a deep cut. I don't know if many people got it, but I had a sign that said "Open the Beaches," so that helped. And this year I was Mayor Lionheart from Zootopia.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Mayor.
Of course, happy to do it. Thanks.
Thanks again to Mayor Dominick Pangallo for joining me on the Codcast, and thank you so much for listening. I'm Hallie Claflin. Our production and theme music is by Charlie Cazella. Leave a rating and review wherever you're hearing this now if you want to help other folks find us, and email codcast@commonwealthbeacon.org if you ever want to get in touch directly. We'll be back next week.